Hello, B. Thanks for taking part in this series of interviews. We're talking to people about change that they've experienced in their lives, either change that's been forced on them or change that they've decided they need to make in their own lives. And we're trying to find out more about what happened to them and how they went about it. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what was the particular issue that you had to confront?
So I am a marketer. I've been marketing for over 12 years. I'm a mother of two. I've got oh goodness, how old now? Five, just turned 5, and 7-year-old. My particular issue that I faced in year 4 of primary school, I was diagnosed, labelled, tagged, whichever you do at the time. Quite a late diagnosis. By getting into year 4, it impacted quite a lot of my early years learning. And I have consistently struggled with the label that gave me. I think one of the biggest things is I missed out on PE from year 4 onwards because I was always in intervention learning. So I was always the different kid that had to go off in one direction whilst everyone else went off in another. And it really impacted me at A-level stage and then into the early part of my career. And still today there's still moments of doubt. I'm sure we'll get onto that, but there was some quite interesting analysis that someone gave me the other day about some of the impact of that early years that still does haunt me now.
Indeed. So you got this label saying you were dyslexic. How did you feel at the time and how did it affect you?
I'm quite isolated because I grammar for me passed me entirely, because I think in those classes where I was trying to even make sense of the words, the learning of the grammar, and still now, my grammar is horrendous. I never rely on that because I just never ever learnt the basic principles, because I was always trying to keep up with the actual spelling of the words and understanding the actual words themselves.
So you've obviously worked very hard to overcome it. What motivated you to do that?
I think sheer determination, and I think I was very lucky because I think I could have very easily have gone one way or another. I think there was one particular incident when I studied incredibly hard for my GCSEs, and I've always been an early riser. I still am, but I was up at 5 a.m. every morning studying before school, a full day at school, and then studying again in the evening. I then came on to my A-levels, and there's a very different change of pace. Luckily, I was quite self-disciplined, so that level of learning and not teaching myself, but that extra work that I had to do was kind of inbuilt in me. But I was told very clearly by the head teacher, don't expect to pass your A-levels, just accept that you're not going to, and don't think that you're going to be successful with the academic side of learning because you're just not going to be. And actually that lit a fire in my belly, and I came out of secondary school with an A, a B and a C, and 2 very strong fingers up to the head teacher, not literally because I've never been like that, but he meant it with the best intentions, as in he was probably trying to create some self-preservation for me.
Yes.
But it felt like I was being told I couldn't succeed and I wouldn't succeed. And luckily that drove a fire and a passion where I was gonna succeed regardless of the cost.
These are fantastic results, especially for somebody who's been given the message that you've been given about don't expect anything. It's absolutely fantastic, a real achievement. So what got you to think, I've got to get over this? You said you worked very hard and there was a kind of fire in your belly. But what was it underneath it all that made you think, I've got to do something? Because it could have gone either way. There are plenty of people who had been told that, who would have just given up and not tried to do what you did.
I think when I look back at it now and I analyse it, it was my desire to please my parents, and to be seen as successful in their eyes. I'm the oldest I've got 2 younger brothers, so I was kind of the one going out there first. I got a place at university after my A-levels, but I was so exhausted, I just had to take a year out. And what actually happened in that year out is I learned that I really enjoyed the workplace. And I very quickly realised that academically I've done my bit to get to my A-levels, but university for me probably just would have pushed me over the edge. But interestingly, in my first job, my job was to fax the adverts up to the London advertising agency, and then to take the receipts back and then check them in on the system and then give them out to the relevant people to get checked. And that London agency called me about 6 months into my year placement, and they said, would you consider coming and being interviewed for an account assistant position? And I said, oh, no, I'm going to university in September. And then I discussed it with mum and dad, and they said, well, the interview experience is pretty good. You'd be going up to London. So I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I got there, had a really good interview, really clicked with the guy. And he said, so we've just got an exercise that you need to do now, and then we'll be in touch with your results. And I was, okay, fine. And it was a spelling test, and literally my stomach just dropped. I nearly got up and walked out. What I quickly recognised, though, was it wasn't a spelling test. It's a proofreading exercise. And I, at the time, thought I was going to be assessed on the spelling. What I was actually assessed on was my ability to spot where there were mistakes. I didn't know that at the time. I cried all the way home, said to mum it was a complete waste of time, got completely humiliated, don't want the results. And then I got a phone call the next day offering me a job. Fantastic. Because my ability to spot where the errors were was actually the strength they were looking for. And I'd become very good at that because I knew what was wrong with a word. I just didn't know how to correct it. Yes. Or a sentence structure. So that for me, that was the start of my career. And that's I was managing a team of 7 people by the time my friends came out of university, just because for me, on the job learning and experience was much stronger for me. Yes. But that element of success and proving that I'm successful haunts me even today. And I went to a shaman who did a session with me, a journaling session with me, which was really, really insightful. But what it ended up showing me was that I'm still constantly going back and seeking approval from my parents. And one particular image that came to me during this session was a Viking ship. I was on the seashore and there was a Viking ship coming towards me, and there were some really angry pirates all hanging off the side, and they were coming towards me. And I was laughing because I was just like, where's this visual impact come from? And then before I knew it, Silver was steering the ship. So Silver is my dad. That's what his nickname is. And I just was laughing, and the shaman said to me, what are you seeing? And I explained it. And I said, my dad would never be doing that. And then she said, what do you think that actually demonstrates to you? What do you think that shows? And the fact that he was steering the ship under duress, he didn't want to be doing it anymore. And she was explaining that actually it's time for you to step out and steer your own ship and not constantly seek their affirmations. So yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? 40 years on or 30 years on, the impact of someone telling you that you're not going to get somewhere, and the psychological effect that has on you, constantly seeking success. And what does success look like?
That is such a great story. I had goosebumps while you were telling me that. And it's just amazing. And actually, I think it's true that we allow our parents to influence us far longer than we should, either for good or for bad. And trying to please our parents is a perfectly good motivation. But as you say, when you're a bit older, it has to become something else. So what does it become for you now?
That essence of defining what is successful for me has always been, or something I've definitely worked on in the last couple of years. I remember the gentleman that interviewed me, Mike, for my first ever job, we're still in contact. And a very pertinent point in my career, he said to me, what does success look like for you, B? And I've had to do a lot around that, because there's monetary success, there's monetary independence that I strive for because I want us to be comfortable. But success is, for me, is much more having rounded children who are very happy with their home life, have a fun, happy home life, but do what they want to do in their own careers. They can do whatever they want to do as long as they're happy and as long as they're fulfilled in what they're doing. And I think trying to create that home environment for me, to show them through my own application what hard work can achieve, and that you should always absolutely try your best. As long as you've tried your best at whatever you've done, if you fail, it doesn't matter. It's as long as you've applied as much as you possibly can. And I think for me is feeling success in doing that every day.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And you said earlier about sometimes things come back to haunt you and you hear those voices again. Does that still happen to you now?
I keep reading all these articles about imposter syndrome, and I think it's a very real problem. I don't think I have it. I think my own self-doubt creeps in sometimes. I tell you what happens sometimes is I'll go back to things that I've written and I'll reread them and I'll think, oh, who wrote that? Because I don't believe that I've had the ability to write it myself. And then I'll think, oh no, actually I did do that. So I think it's very much doubt. And I tell you something that frustrates the hell out of me is I constantly have to change my emails because I can't actually find the words that I know what I want to use, but I can't find the spelling for it. So I constantly find other words that I need to use, but I always think if only I could use the words I wanted, I'd probably sound a hell of a lot more intellectual than I do in my own version of it. But then again, a psychology friend of mine said to me the other day, well, just pick up Siri and say, how do you spell that, Siri? He said, you're not in an open office, because when I ran the agency, I always had dictionary next to me. I always had my little Collins dictionary and I could easily just look. One of the challenges there is I don't always know what the start of the word is, so you can't always look it up. But in the agency, I would often ask if I was stuck, because managing director, they didn't quite expect you to do that. But I strengths are strengths, weaknesses are weaknesses. But now I'm in my own office, I've got nobody around me. Siri can tell me the spelling, and I don't have to worry about anybody hearing what I'm asking.
Yes. Yes, the joys of modern technology in a good way. The last question I wanted to ask you was, you sound as though you've put a huge amount of work into this yourself. Did you have any help along the way?
Yeah, mum and dad were very supportive. Dad is dyslexic, but was always just diagnosed as a lazy kid at school because of his generation. Mum was very supportive, but she also had two young boys. So there was a bit of mum always looks at me and says, you'll be fine because you're made of my stock. And a lot of the time I am fine, but a lot of the time possibly had we've had one-on-one support, it might have been easier, but she was a busy mum with two young boys. The school were I don't think they were supportive, actually. It was what they did best of what they had at the time. The biggest support I've had is when I stepped into that career in London and someone believing in me and then helping me shape who I was and what I was. And, they're still very, very influential in my life now. I often find myself thinking, what would they do in this scenario? And that really helps guide me. So that's support in my early career, which makes me absolutely adamant to support anybody that works with me to help them pursue their career path, whatever strengths and weaknesses or challenges that they have.
It's great to have those figures in our lives, people who are role models, who support us and help us through in the difficulties that we've got. Everything you've said, B, has just been such a great story, because on our retreats, we work with people to look at various things that have happened to them in their lives, very often that hold them back. And we work with them to see how they can build on them, turn them into something different, perhaps retell the story. Because very often the difficulties don't go away. We can overcome them, but usually they become part of who we are. And I think that everything you've said has been a really great example of that. So thank you so much for that.